This talk is a bit softer than the one before. It's mainly about project management. I know that it sounds boring, but ignoring it can have some serious consequences, which I'll be talking about it. And before I go deeper into the subject, I'd like to tell a few words about myself, my studio. First question, is anybody here doing game dev, mobile games in particular? No one. Okay, I will take it into consideration. So this is me. I was doing some corpo stuff before I jumped into game development in 2012. So it's 4 years now. That's not a lot. I'm still learning. Game development, it's just you have to adjust constantly. But I had some experience in managing projects, especially in bigger projects for bigger customers. So that was my background before I started. So we are Tabasco Interactive, like I said, founded in 2012. There's 11 of us. We did 3 games. We failed once. We have 2 more games in production. And the game we failed to deliver was called Bruce, the game. We were working on it for 16 months. And after that, we decided to cancel the project. And this project will be the main focus of my talk. Aside from Bruce, you could say that in parallel we are doing 2 projects. Bruce was one of them, and Star Horizon was the second one. And I was mostly involved in Star Horizon. We released it in 2004. It was we are really proud of it. You can call it a success. It was featured worldwide. Many gaming media called it one of the best looking games on mobile. But after Star Horizon, we wanted to do a short break because we were mentally exhausted after that project. It was you have to know that the last 2 months I was working 300 hours a month. So my day was looking like go to work, work until 9 p.m., go home, take a shower, and work more until 1 a.m. And repeat. No weekends. So this was really hard for us. And after that, we decided, okay, let's not do a bigger project right now. Let's focus on something small. And that's how Kick Arena was born. And this is a funny story because it was only 3 months of development, and in only 2 weeks it managed to gather the same amount of income that Star Horizon did for at least 3 or 4 months. And after that, we ditched any plans for doing Star Horizon sequel, and we focused on that. We released a sequel this year. It was downloaded over 1 million times in just only a week after its release. So both games are downloaded by now for almost 10 million times. And it was a top sports game in almost every country on the App Store. So let's go back to Bruce. Up until lately, we had to face questions like this: what's happening to Bruce? There were people that you have to know that this project was looking really promising. It was if you like Sin City, if you like noir films, it was something like that. It had to be. It was supposed to be a 2D platformer in retro noir style, and that was something that was ranked to a lot of people, and this guy is one of them. But Bruce had a happy ending. We just recently sold the rights to another company, so you will probably see this game released, but not by us. For us, it's still a failure. So Bruce, the team that was working on Bruce was very talented and experienced. We gathered experts. You can call them experts. right now they are working on one of the bigger companies in Poland. They knew how to make games. We had secured financing because you have to know Tabasco is part of a larger company called Bluesoft. Maybe you've heard of it. So Bluesoft is our, an angel here. It's financing us, so we didn't have to worry about it. Like I told you, the idea, every member on the team felt that the idea is great. We were really excited about it. We had full creative control. There was no publisher. So what went wrong? And opposite to that, there was the second game we were doing, Star Horizon. It was led by me, a beginner in game dev. The idea was not so original. It was supposed to be a rail shooter, something like Star Fox, maybe you know the game, or more like the mini game from Star Wars: The Old Republic. And another difference is that I had to constantly struggle and prove to my supervisors that the idea makes sense, that we are on track, that we are delivering milestones, because they didn't quite believe in us. And despite all those odds, Star Horizon was released, and it's a success. And Bruce went to the limbo. So what failed? We were doing many talks inside our company, and we were thinking about it hard. What went wrong with Bruce? And well, my theory, and I am pretty certain about that the biggest thing to blame was poor project management, and especially two things: risk management and communication management. And those two things I will focus on those two things during my talk. I won't be talking about scheduling or timetables or project management. I won't be talking about Scrum. So, a guy talk about project management, not mentioning Scrum is a crazy guy, yeah. So, but I'm doing on purpose. I'm doing this on purpose because I think that those things are not essential to project management, and in fact, I think that they can, give you a false assurance of security. An easy example: Bruce had Scrum. Bruce had tons of documentation. Bruce had awesome Excel tables. They were, yeah. We had none of that, and this didn't make a difference. So you probably know that any projects in general are risky, and IT projects and game development projects are risky. In particular, you probably all know that stuff, the 90-10 rule, that only 10 projects are delivered, and all that stuff. So my point is that if you followed gaming news, you'd probably know this one. It's mostly focused on game development. It's a chart showing sales for games and total games released, and the point where those lines meet is where Steam Greenlight was introduced. This is, people say that the hell gates were open and everybody was free to put their game on Steam with a bit of effort, but it's now much easier than before Greenlight. So the competition is fierce, and Steam is not secure anymore. It's getting closer and closer to what mobile app stores look like now. And yeah, that's what sprinkled the hashtag called Indie Apocalypse, the apocalypse of indie game studios. So my point is that projects are by definition risky, And this comes directly from the definition of a project. If you're familiar with maybe Prince, that's a Prince Foundation. It's a certificate you could get in project management. It defines project in this way. It's something that's temporary, has a start and end date. It's something that delivers products, and it's something that is unique. And this is important because assembling motorcycles is not project. You do it constantly. It's not unique. So this uniqueness requirements is something that, by definition, tells us that projects are risky because you are constantly doing stuff that nobody did before. So let's go into risk. What is risk? Well, you could call those things risk. You could call those questions. Well, will we make it on time? Will our features will be cool, useful? Do we have enough financing? What we do if our project won't break even? Yeah. So also, risk is something that is proportional to the impact and to its probability. What risk is not a problem. Problem is something that occurred. You have to, so risk is dealt before a problem occurs. So that's something you shouldn't confuse problems with risk management. And problem management is something, a different, branch of project management. So what can you do with risk? And this is something that also Prince tells us. First step, you need to identify risks. And how I look at it is something that when a project manager is identifying risk, he has to be some kind of a, that mean person that looks everywhere and looks for bugs everywhere. And generally, if the team doesn't like you, that's probably you're doing your job good at identifying the risk, because this is something you have to, constantly. You have to. Your team constantly needs to prove that you are doing. You're on track. You have to put everything in doubt. And if you identify the risks, the second stage is to assess the risk. You need to take into consideration, is this risk worth of taking action? One example of a risk you wouldn't mind taking action to would be the zombie apocalypse. Though I heard the Pentagon has plans for zombie apocalypse. So from their standpoint, it was meaningful to assess that risk. But probably zombie apocalypse wouldn't matter to your project. So, and if you identify the risk that is worth looking into, you should take action. And what can you do? First, you can avoid the risk. It's a valid choice. If you're considering developing a risky feature, maybe it's worth doing something safer. You can transfer a risk. Think about insurance. Insurances are transferring risks. You can. What we did, and this action proved really good. We were doing two projects simultaneously. We were doing Bruce and Star Horizon. One of the projects failed, but the other one managed to deliver, and that's why I'm here. Because if we were doing only Bruce, I wouldn't probably. There wouldn't be probably Tabasco anymore. You can also accept risk. You can say, oh, okay, I know this risk exists, but I've analyzed it thoroughly, and I think it's okay. This is a good example. It's not worth, taking action to your children. Let them fall, let them have bruises. That's what's childhood for. And my favorite one, reduce and control. You can always do a prototype. And that's what we are all doing, aren't we? Prototypes are really cool. So what we did in Star Horizon, we had this, question. We had to give an estimation for the game's budget. So we were thinking about doing 10 levels, and the question was, how much time would it take to make 10 levels? So we did one, and then took an educated guess out of that making 10 would be this and this. If you multiply it by 10, you'd probably get a wrong number, but it's still better than guessing, right? When doing prototypes, quick and dirty is the way. You probably want to have that answer as soon as possible, and you don't always need to code when you're concerned. Think about UI prototypes. You can do them with pen and papers, right? And you can test UI with just some paper on your users. That will be really quick, and it's a really valid way to prototype a UI. So a special type of prototype, especially in game development, but also on normal projects, is a vertical slice. Yeah, I call it a prototype on steroids because it's something that's bigger, so it volatiles the rule of making it quick and dirty. But it's really important because vertical slice has all the features in place, maybe not all the content, but it gives you an idea of the final product. And what's important about vertical slice and prototypes in general, if it doesn't work, you don't go further if it doesn't work. So figure out what's making it not working. And an example of how we failed with Bruce was the vertical slice we made had some serious issues with the combat mechanics. We simply thought that they are not fun, and I guess nobody did. But we thought, okay, we will figure it out later on. Let's move on. People are waiting. We need to give them something to do. So later on, when we managed to figure out what needs to be done to make the combat feel a bit fun, it occurred that we need to do some tweaks to the level design. And at that point, we had half of the game was done, so we need to throw away half of the levels, make them again, and basically that was the point when when the first project manager was fired. Yeah, and that was the point when I came, with a full force on this project. Unfortunately, I wasn't. I also failed to save this project, but it was simply too late. So you can slice the lifetime of a project into those stages. And what's important about those stages, if you don't, it's that you shouldn't move on if you have a problem. So if what we do when we make a new game, we start with a vision statement. Vision statement is something, a short document explaining what the game will be about. So a vision statement for Star Horizon was, okay, let's make a space game. It will be a rail shooter similar to Star Fox, similar to Star Wars: The Old Republic. It will be an easy task to develop because of that and that and that. Okay, so this was like maybe 3 or 4 pages, something really, really short. And then afterwards we did a first prototype in 2 weeks, and after that we did something bigger. And after each stage we were asking questions. Is this working? Is this okay? What changes do we need to make? And this worked really, really good because I was working probably on the first level for about half a year, I think, and I was tweaking it constantly doing some adjustments to make the gameplay feel good. And only after that we moved into full-scale production, and that was another 6 months. Okay, so It's disproportionate because the first level had this huge amounts of work, and you could say that it would be at the beginning you could say that it was a waste of time because this one level was really expensive to make, but this made the whole project really easier to make later on, and this was again a striking difference between how Star Horizon was being made and how Bruce was being made. So this part of the talk will be, I think, more fun because it's about communication and all the funny things that relate to it, and well, mainly about miscommunication, right? So I'll start with ants. You know what's funny about ants? It's that they are only insects that can build stuff like this, ants and bees, and what's really what's different about bees and ants than, I don't know, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes don't build that stuff, but bees do. So those are the only insects that are able to share information, and they don't have bigger brains or anything like that. The only difference is they share information via some chemical signals. And this brought me to a conclusion. You can say that a team only exists only if every member on that team has some competence and communication skills. Because when there is no communication skills, there's no competence whatsoever. And well, it's really simple. You need to talk to each other. And I imagine right now I was expecting that most of you will do something like that, because this is something, really obvious. But the truth is that it's not. And human race has some. Our brains, in particular, have this mechanism of having this tunnel vision, and this is most of the time this is really useful because it makes us it lets our brains function normally. If we were to analyze every bit of information, our brains would simply explode. So we simplify the data that we receive. And to give you an example from Bruce, there was this artist working on the project, and there was this programmer working on the project. They were sitting, opposite to each other. And Bruce, being a side scroller to the game, didn't have, at the time that I went to the project, didn't have any parallax mechanics. Parallax is something that you build layers of your background and they move independently, giving an immersion of depth, despite the game being 2D. So this is something, basic stuff for a 2D game. So I was, pretty shocked not seeing that into the game at that time. So I asked that artist. He was the game art director, and he told me that, okay, yeah, that's a good question. I wanted to do that, but the tools aren't working. So I was, really surprised to hear that, because my background is a programmer, so I'm a programmer myself, and I know that writing tools like that is just a couple hours of work, maybe less. So I went from him to the programmer guy that was sitting opposite him, and I told him, your friend has a problem with the tools for parallax. What's wrong with the tools? He says, well, the tools are working, so what's the problem? And he went to the guy, showed him how the tools how he should be working with that tool, and a couple hours later, or maybe the next day, we had parallax in the game. So those guys, that's a really, really good example for how tunnel vision works. And what I like to say, I don't think that those guys were dummies or they were experts at what they were doing, but at that particular problem, it was blocked from them. So, and this is where project manager should step in. He should be the one that is looking over such situations and pointing over such problems. Another fun thing about communication in general is this chart. There was a survey among IT workers, and they were asked, who would you like to work with if you weren't able to choose the incompetent jerk or the rock star? So who would you choose, competent jerk or the likable fool? So the employees answered, well, I think the likable fool is a better choice, but the employers answered, well, I think the competent jerk is the better choice. And the question is, who is right? So if you know my equation from the couple slides earlier, you would choose the likable fool, because there are examples, and Jesse Scholl, which I'm referring to at the end of the talk, give an example. He's the guy that was doing some projects for Disney and in Disney theme parks. He was giving a talk and giving this example that he worked on a project where he had like 6 rock stars, very experienced guys on the project, and it wasn't working. The project wasn't working. So what he did, he put a likable fool in the project, a guy that wasn't, maybe the best of the best developers, but he was a guy that you can have a beer with, you can tell a joke. He's overall funny, and this guy was working like a proxy between all those other rock stars. And what happened? The project moved on, and it's a good story telling us how communication is really important. Another example I like to talk about is this situation when you're working, from home and not together in one office. You probably wouldn't have this kind of dialogue. So imagine a situation when you are working hard on something and you are swearing to yourself that this piece of crap isn't working. And when you're working together with your friends, you give yourself a chance that somebody hears that and helps you. And this is not something I invented. Well, I wanted to skip to, you probably know this, the communication chart, that most of the communication isn't verbal. It's in our body language, it's in the way we talk, it's in the way we move. So the most of the communication comes through face-to-face contacts, and the least one is email. So this is not something I invented. This is something that Pixar, a really awesome company, was built around. And take a look at the Pixar building. Steve Jobs designed it on purpose with those glass walls. It's very open. They have this cafeteria inside the building, and it's all built on purpose because cafeteria is in the center, because it helps people to see each other, even incidentally during their lunchtime. They have this walkways. When you're walking from one part of the building to the other, you have the chance to see another person, and that small thing and the eye contact, it's something that might stop you from writing a nasty email, maybe, and this works, because you might know about the Pixar and Disney merger. When Pixar bought Disney and Disney bought Pixar, Disney was in trouble before that. They had Lion King was their last hit movie before the merger, so that was like 16 years of not doing business really good, and after that, Pixar came in. They implemented the managing standards, and boom, you have Frozen. Frozen was just third movie after Pixar merger, and only third one. So, and I don't know. I think it's still the best-selling animation to this date. To move things further, and that's a test for you if you're paying attention or not. So the question is, if you were to design your office, which layout would you choose? The left one or the right one?
Right one.
Right one. Yes. Anybody thinking different? No. Yes,
well,
that's.
It depends on the verbosity of other coworkers.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it might be, but
If they're verbose,
Okay.
the right one is the more suitable one.
yeah.
What would you choose?
Yeah, I definitely go with the right one, and that's the thing that we are doing on purpose. And again, maybe not on purpose, but that's again another thing that was different about Bruce and different about Star Horizon. Well, those guys, this programmer and this artist, they were sitting opposite to each other in a layout like this, like the left one. So I like this one because when we are working on a game, and when I'm walking into the studio with my cup of coffee, I see what's everybody working on, and well, it takes a bit of honesty, because I don't make a fuss about if somebody's writing to her girlfriend on Messenger or looking at Facebook for 5 minutes. That's okay. But the point is that I see what's the progress of the project, and I can give some spontaneous feedback that I can say, oh, this is looking cool, this is working really great. And with that kind of layout, it's a bit harder. I would need to just make a deliberate action to walk around this island. And another thing is that if you want to share some feedback, you just turn around and just yell at your coworkers. In that case, you would have to stand up. We as developers are oftentimes thinking if 2 or 3 clicks is okay for an UI, and imagine that you would have to stand up right now. Imagine that your user would have to stand up to enter the menu in your application. That's horrible. So that's why I'm a big fan of this one. And also, we don't do much documentation, but you probably are agile as well, so you probably know that it's good. And another thing, well, maybe not so obvious, but Bruce had a project manager, but not really. This guy was present at the studio, but he wasn't doing his job really good. So a PM is someone that needs to take some hard choices, and he needs to solve conflicts. And it's not about people yelling at each other and fighting. It's about when you have 3 visions that are equally good, you need to choose. And because it was something like that in Bruce. We had like 3 really vocal people that every one of them had really good ideas, but they didn't have a leader. So it was dwelling, like the project wasn't moving on because there wasn't one really concrete vision. And it's often at times better just to pick a random one, not to take time. You can always go back. So this meme is something that describes this. You don't need a boss, someone that yells at you. You need someone that will put you in the right direction. And one of the last stories I'd like to tell you about communication in project management is Pixar's Braintrust. What's a Braintrust? Pixar has this group of for every project, for every movie they are making, they have this this body called Braintrust. It's a group of people that meets every so often, and they share the feedback about the movie. And what's really interesting about this body is that the director doesn't have to the Braintrust has no power over the director, but the director has to address the feedback somehow. And addressing feedback is also saying, okay, I've heard you, but I don't agree with you. So, and one really good example of how Braintrust helped in the Incredibles movie is this scene. I don't know if you're familiar with this movie, but it's about a family of superheroes. This guy to the right is the husband, and that's his wife, and they have an argument here. And in the first version of the script, and the first feedback from this scene was that. And you have to know that this guy is, really bulky. He's a really big guy, and the first version of the scene was looking really like he was, really a bit too harsh to her, and that was looking really rude and really, aggressive. That was the feedback, and the tone of that argument wasn't well. It was too harsh. And this director, collected this feedback. He looked at the dialogue, and he thought he read the dialogue again, and he thought to himself, "No, I think this dialogue is okay. It has to be something different." But the feedback he received was, you have to change the dialogue. So what he did, this woman, she has the superpower of stretching her body, and in the final moment of this argument, she stretched her head above the head of this guy, so she's a bit taller than he is, and that was the main difference in this scene. So the scene was remade. The Braintrust, they gathered again, and the feedback was, yeah, it's really, really good. And the people asked, the Braintrust people asked, what changes to the dialogue did you make? And the funny thing is, no changes to the dialogue were made. Only, just the visual presentation was changed. So the important thing, and that's why Braintrust has no power over the director, and that's why the director has to address the feedback by himself, because he knows the movie, he knows what's working in the movie, in the project, but that's you will always you will oftentimes receive feedback like that something's not working, especially I don't know, maybe in some UX stuff on UIs, and if you're working on a game on the gameplay side, that's something that is not working, but probably the feedback won't tell you how to fix it. It's on you. So, okay, I think I've managed to go to the end, and I'd like to sum up those two projects. So what went wrong and what went right. So the first big mistake we made with Bruce was that we failed to identify the risk that if we move on after the problems we had with vertical slice, they will have some serious consequences later on. That was the first thing. The second thing was that the guys working on Bruce were based in Katowice, and the head of the studios, the Bluesoft, is based in Warsaw. So we will, we were communicating, by I don't know, we were there once every 2 weeks for a discussion, for a couple hours, and that's definitely not enough. This displacement made us not see the real issues in this project. And the third important part is that the project had no real leader. It had a hypothetical leader, yeah, but he was not doing his work, and especially he didn't have the guts to make the hard choices and to steer the project in the right direction. So, but we are okay. we managed to survive that. So, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because initially it was something that it was difficult to deal with, but eventually it gave us, it made us stronger. So if this something like that happens to you, at least make a talk about it, help others and share information. And if you survive, you will be stronger after that. So, and lastly, I'd like to share some sources and inspiration for this talk. One is Jesse Shaw's Art of Game Design. And this keynote, Information Flow, the secret to studio of structure, and it will be really informative if you're not doing game dev also, because it's generally on structuring your studio and on project management. And another one is Creativity Incorporated from Ed Catmull. He's the president of Pixar and Disney Animation. He shares some really useful tips on and stories on how Pixar was founded and their philosophy on working with the company. Okay, so that's all. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. If not, have a nice beer or anything that you're doing. Okay, so thank you.